Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Pamela's Journey, Trauma to Triumph. I'm so grateful that you're here. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that once I learned how to do this, I have never looked back. Okay? We're going to talk about boundaries and why they are essential in your healing process. So boundaries are a form of self-respect, self-care, and self-love. They let people know what is and isn't okay with you. And it is okay to tell people what is okay and isn't okay for you. When you grow up in trauma or a toxic environment, boundaries might feel unfamiliar and even scary. You might have learned to people please, over-explain, apologize, and tolerate mistreatment to avoid conflict. But guess what? Healing means you get to unlearn all of that. You are allowed to say, nope, I'm not available. And you don't have to give a reason. You're just not available. You get to say, that doesn't work for me. And again, no guilt, no explanation. And you're allowed to say, I need space, and then take it. You are not responsible for other people's reactions to your boundaries. I'm going to say that one more time. You are not responsible for other people's reactions to your boundaries. Let that sink in. So let's talk about some signs that are proof of toxic behavior. Okay, so some signs of toxic behavior to look for are they dismiss your feelings or your needs. They manipulate you through guilt or fear. They ignore or bulldoze your limits. And they make everything about them. If this sounds familiar, it's okay. You're not alone. And their behavior is not your fault. As we get ready to discuss how to set boundaries, I want to let you know that as you put boundaries in place with people that have never had boundaries in your relationship with you before, they are gonna go nuts. And they are going to amp up their toxic behavior. I promise you they will. So the analogy that I was once given by my own therapist years ago, and I use with my clients now, is your relationship with somebody is like a pop machine. So they put their money in and they push a button and they expect to get whatever that selection is, whether it's Coke, Sprite, whatever. So they push the button, they're expecting you to react in a certain way, just as a Coke machine. They expect a Coke. But what happens when the Coke button is empty? When you go to select it and nothing comes out because there's no more Coke in the machine? Most people will push a different button. They'll make a different selection. That's the same when you start to set boundaries. People will push a button expecting to get that response from you. And if you have a boundary in place and you're no longer giving them that response, they're going to start pushing other buttons to try to get a response from you. So just be aware, because that was something that totally floored me. And I'm so grateful that my counselor gave me that analogy and that it helped me a lot. That's why I'm sharing it with you, and it does tend to help a lot of my clients as well. All right, so let's talk about how to set boundaries, okay? Number one, get clear on what you need. Start with what feels unsafe, draining, and disrespectful. Number two, start small. One sentence can be a boundary. So for example, I'm not discussing that topic today. Number three, use I statements. It keeps the focus on your needs and not their flaws. So for example, I need space after we talk so I can decompress. Number four, repeat if necessary. Some people will push and push and push. You calmly repeating yourself, I've already set my boundary, is enough. Number five, don't explain or justify. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace. And yes, sometimes the strongest boundary is distance. It's okay to walk away. It's not cruel. It's clarity. So let me give you an example of one of the first boundaries I set, because for me, my toxic relationship was with my mom. And if my mom and I disagreed, or she didn't like what I was doing, she would become verbally and emotionally abusive. And she would start to yell, and she would say hurtful things. So the first thing that I had to do was I had to figure out how to stop that behavior, because I was no longer going to allow her to verbally diarrhea on me. So I started off small, and I told her that when our conversation starts to go in a toxic direction, that it was done. It was just done. Whether we were on the phone, whether we were in person, that I was going to remove myself from the situation. So I would use I statements when the conversation started to turn, right? When it started to get to that point where we were starting to go into that abusive verbal diarrhea phase. And I would say, I need this to be a respectful conversation, and if it can't be, then I will remove myself from this conversation. I would say it once. When she continued, I would remove myself from the situation. Hang up. Leave from where I was. Go. I actually would leave family events in the middle of family events because I wasn't staying. Because going into a different room wasn't enough, because shortly after I returned to the bigger group, it would continue. So for me, I had to actually leave. I didn't tell people I was leaving. I didn't offer any excuses or reasoning. I just protected my peace and I left. I don't owe an explanation, and I don't need to justify my behavior to anybody else, especially to people that are going to stand around and witness that level of abuse and disrespect towards me. Another important point about boundary setting is when you are setting your boundaries and determining what your reaction will be or what the consequences are. So in my case, when it became abusive, I would remove myself from the situation. You have to make sure that whatever the boundary is you set and the reaction is that you've told them that how you will react when your boundaries are crossed, you have to make sure you are willing to follow through. So setting a boundary I will never speak to them again if they're disrespectful to me one more time, but you know in your heart that's not true, don't set that as your boundary. You need to be firm on your boundaries, and you need to be willing to follow through. So I always remind my clients when they're working on setting boundaries that you need to make sure that whatever you say your reaction will be to when your boundaries are crossed, that you're willing to follow through with them. Now for myself, I spent years giving my family the opportunity to learn to live within my boundaries. And there are times within those 10 years where things were good and my boundaries were respected. But they would always start to deteriorate again, and we would fall back into old patterns, and then I'd have to reestablish boundaries and go back, or they would start behaving in another completely inappropriate way, and so then I would have to set boundaries there. For me, personally, it got to the point where I said, I'm done. And so my boundary today is to no longer have a relationship with them. I choose not to engage with my parents nor my sister. I have such a peace since making this boundary. And I gotta tell you, as holiday times come around, that societal belief that I'm supposed to have a family dinner with my family creeps back in. But then I just push that aside because I know that's bullshit, right? Because I would not have a relationship with these people if they were not blood related to me. And I woke up and I realized that having a relationship with people just because they have a title to me or we share the same blood is not healthy. And society shouldn't be telling people that they need to have relationships with people like that. If people don't treat you well and they make you feel badly, then you don't need to be in their presence. And again, I'm not suggesting you cut your family out of your life, okay? This was an extreme decision that I made, and I made it after 10 years of working on boundaries with my family. But I just got to a point one day when I said, why am I doing this? I'm only doing this because society tells me and guilt tells me, and other people are like, what do you mean you don't talk to your parents, right? Those are the reasons that I was continuing to engage in relationships and continuing to try and make it work. Today, I don't do that anymore. And I don't have any guilt about it. Okay? Easter's coming up. My husband got a text 2 weeks ago from my mother asking if he can convince me to come to the family Easter dinner. Like, that's not manipulation right there. And also, as a side note, that's not how my marriage works. I have a healthy marriage. My husband and I don't ever convince each other of anything. We share our thoughts and feelings about the situation, but at the end of the day, I support whatever he decides to do, and he supports whatever I decide to do. I would never try to convince my husband that he should do something that he didn't want to do. But anyways, so this is just an example from my life of how boundary setting has progressed to the point where I eventually made this decision that I'm no longer having contact with them. They still get access to my kids. My other kids are older. They decide what they do. But my youngest son still wants to have a relationship with them. So he'll be going for Easter dinner. But my husband and I will not. And that's okay. We're just going to have a different kind of Easter. And I'm kind of excited about it. And the most important thing is, it's a boundary that I've put in place, and I'm not backing down from it. I had to take a lot of time to think about it because I knew once I said it that I had to keep it. And so I am. And it lives guilt-free in my head. Like, I have such a peace about it. I hope you all get to find a peace with setting your boundaries as well. All right, so as I am getting ready to wrap up this topic, I want to remind you, and I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to be unavailable to toxic energy, whether it's people, places, or things, and you are allowed to prioritize your peace over someone else's comfort. Setting boundaries is an act of healing, and it gets easier over time. I have a peace today in regards to my boundaries that I have set. I have a peace that I have never experienced in my life. I love it so much that I am not willing to break it or compromise it for anyone. Period. Not even my family. All right, so drop a heart in the comments if you're ready to protect your peace. If this video was helpful to you, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with somebody else on their healing journey. Remember, you are not alone. You are so worthy of living in a safe and loving connections. So until next time, keep turning your trauma into triumph. Tomorrow we'll be doing a book review, the best books on trauma and healing, according to the internet, and I will throw in a few of my own. I'm wishing you a very blessed day.